History is often told through the rise and fall of empires, the ambitions of kings, and the clash of armies. Yet some of the most powerful forces that shaped our world were far too small to see. Long before modern medicine, before microscopes, before humanity understood the existence of bacteria or viruses, invisible organisms were already shaping civilizations. These silent travelers moved through cities, across oceans, and along the trade routes that connected the ancient world. And sometimes they changed the course of human history forever. In the year 541 CE, the Mediterranean world stood at the height of imperial power. The Byzantine Empire ruled vast territories stretching from the eastern Mediterranean to North Africa and parts of Europe. At its center stood Constantinople, one of the largest and richest cities on earth. Ships arrived daily from distant lands carrying grain, spices, silk, and precious goods that fed the empire. But hidden among those ships was something far more dangerous than any invading army. An unseen passenger that no one yet understood. That year, a deadly disease began spreading across the ports of the eastern Mediterranean. It started quietly. A few unexplained deaths, then dozens, then thousands. Within months, entire cities were overwhelmed. This was the first historically recorded pandemic of bubonic plague, a disease caused by a bacterium known today as Yersinia pestis. And the world was about to learn how fragile civilization could be. The plague was not simply a human story. It was the result of a complex relationship between animals, microbes, and the expanding networks of human trade. Rodents carried the bacteria, fleas spread the infection, and human cities became the perfect environment for disaster. In the story of disease, humanity is never alone. We share our world with countless organisms, some harmless, some essential, and some capable of changing history itself. This is not only the story of one plague. It is the story of how disease has shaped humanity, animals, and the fragile balance between them. Across centuries and continents, epidemics have rewritten the destinies of empires, societies, and cultures. In this archive, we explore those moments where biology and history collide. Because sometimes the smallest organisms leave the largest marks on our world. In the year 541 CE, something invisible began moving through the Mediterranean world. It did not carry swords. It did not command armies. Yet it would kill millions. Across the harbors of Egypt, the crowded docks of Syria, and the vast trading routes of the Byzantine Empire, a silent traveler was spreading from ship to ship, port to port, city to city. At first, no one understood what was happening. A few deaths appeared in coastal towns, then dozens. Then entire neighborhoods began to fall silent. Merchants collapsed in the markets. Sailors died on their ships. Families watched loved ones develop strange swellings and fevers that no physician could explain. Within weeks, the rumors became terror. The Mediterranean world of the 6th century was one of the most interconnected systems humanity had ever built. Grain ships sailed constantly from Egypt to feed the enormous population of Constantinople. Traders carried spices, silk, animals, and precious metals across continents. Yet hidden among these networks of prosperity was an ecological chain that no empire could control. Rats, fleas, and a microscopic bacterium waiting for the right moment to spread. Soon, the great capital of the Byzantine Empire would feel the full force of the catastrophe. When the plague finally reached Constantinople in 542 CE, the city of perhaps 500,000 people began to collapse under a wave of death so overwhelming that even the empire's administration struggled to count the bodies. Some historical accounts claim that thousands were dying each day, their corpses piling in streets, towers, and mass graves as the living struggled simply to survive. This was the first historically recorded pandemic of bubonic plague, a disease caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. But to the people living in that moment, the cause was a mystery. Some believed it was divine punishment. Others blamed poisoned air, distant stars, or foreign enemies. What they could not see was the real architect of the disaster, a microbe traveling through animals, insects, and humans alike. The empire that called itself eternal would suddenly face an enemy smaller than a grain of dust. And in the years that followed, this invisible organism would help reshape the fate of civilizations, weaken armies, disrupt economies, and change the course of history itself. In the early 6th century, the Mediterranean world stood on the foundation of one of the most powerful states of its time, the Byzantine Empire. Emerging from the eastern half of the old Roman Empire, Byzantium had survived the political collapse that shattered the western provinces centuries earlier. From its capital on the Bosporus, it governed vast territories stretching across the Balkans, Anatolia, the eastern Mediterranean, and parts of North Africa. The empire commanded armies, controlled sea routes, and maintained a sophisticated administrative system that connected distant provinces to the imperial center. At the heart of this imperial machine stood Emperor Justinian I, a ruler whose ambitions were as vast as the empire itself. Justinian dreamed not merely of ruling Byzantium, but of restoring the lost glory of the ancient Roman Empire. Through military campaigns, he sought to reclaim territories in Italy, North Africa, and Spain. Through law and administration, he reorganized the foundations of governance. The famous Corpus Juris Civilis, a monumental compilation of Roman law, would shape legal systems for centuries. To Justinian and his court, the empire was not simply surviving, it was entering a new golden age. The symbol of that power was Constantinople, the glittering capital founded by Constantine the Great. By the 6th century, the city had become one of the largest and most prosperous urban centers in the world. Massive defensive walls protected hundreds of thousands of inhabitants. Grand churches, imperial palaces, markets, and forums filled its streets. The recently completed Hagia Sophia towered above the skyline, a breathtaking architectural achievement that proclaimed the wealth and spiritual authority of the empire. Constantinople was more than a political capital. It was a global crossroads of trade. Its harbors were constantly filled with ships arriving from distant regions. Grain fleets sailed north from Egypt to feed the immense population of the city. Merchants from Africa, Arabia, Persia, and the Near East brought spices, textiles, animals, metals, and luxury goods. Every day, the docks buzzed with activity as sailors unloaded cargo and traders negotiated fortunes. Yet this vast web of commerce carried more than wealth. Hidden among sacks of grain, wooden crates, and the dark corners of ship hulls traveled small stowaways, rats, and the fleas that lived upon them. No one in the bustling markets of Constantinople suspected that within these ordinary trade networks existed the perfect pathway for a deadly organism. The same ships that sustained the empire's prosperity would soon deliver something far more dangerous than any enemy fleet. For centuries, people believed that the plague was carried by rats alone. In crowded cities and busy ports, rats were everywhere, running through granaries, hiding inside ships, and living among the shadows of human settlements. When the great epidemic struck, it was easy to blame the animal that people could see. But modern science has revealed a deeper and far more unsettling truth. The real killer was not the rat. It was a bacterium. Its name is Yersinia pestis. This microscopic organism is so small that millions of them could fit on the head of a pin. Yet despite its size, it possesses a terrifying biological efficiency. Once inside the body, the bacterium multiplies rapidly, attacking the immune system and spreading through the bloodstream and lymphatic system. The painful swellings known as buboes, which gave bubonic plague its name, are actually lymph nodes filled with infection and inflammation. The true engine of transmission, however, lies in a tiny insect, the flea. Fleas feed on blood, and many species live on rodents, such as rats, marmots, and ground squirrels. When a flea bites an infected animal, the bacterium enters the insect's digestive system. Inside the flea's gut, Yersinia pestis begins to multiply, eventually forming a blockage that prevents the flea from swallowing blood properly. This blockage creates a deadly cycle. Because the flea cannot feed normally, it becomes desperately hungry. Each time it attempts to bite a new host, the blocked bacteria are forced back into the wound, injecting infection into the bloodstream of the animal or human it has bitten. In this way, a single infected flea can spread the disease repeatedly, turning a tiny parasite into an efficient biological weapon. Rats played a crucial role in this chain of transmission because they lived so closely with humans, especially in cities filled with grain stores and trade goods. When infected rat populations began to die, their fleas searched for new hosts. Humans, living in dense urban environments, became the next link in the chain. What began as a disease circulating quietly among wild rodents suddenly transformed into one of the most devastating pandemics in human history. In the 6th century, none of this was understood. The people of the Byzantine world had no knowledge of bacteria, no microscopes to observe them, and no concept of microbial disease. Yet hidden within the smallest corners of ships, markets, and homes, Yersinia pestis was already moving through animals, insects, and humans alike, silently preparing the catastrophe that would soon engulf an empire. When we think about pandemics, we often imagine a disease moving from one human to another, spreading through cities and nations. But the story of plague begins long before humans ever became part of the chain. In truth, humans were never the original hosts of the disease. The plague was born in the natural world, moving quietly through animal populations for centuries, perhaps even thousands of years, before it ever reached the great cities of civilization. At the center of this hidden ecosystem were wild rodents. Across the grasslands and mountain regions of Asia and parts of Africa, animals such as marmots, gerbils, ground squirrels, and other small mammals lived in vast colonies. Among these animals, the bacterium Yersinia pestis circulated naturally, often without causing immediate extinction. This long-standing relationship between pathogen and host created what scientists today call a natural reservoir, a stable ecological system where the disease could survive for generations. Yet the chain of transmission did not remain in the wilderness. As trade routes expanded and human settlements grew, certain animals began to thrive alongside human society. Among the most important of these was the black rat, a small but incredibly adaptable rodent that followed human civilization wherever food and shelter could be found. Grain stores, ships, warehouses, and crowded urban neighborhoods provided the perfect environment for rat populations to grow in enormous numbers. Living on these rats were the second crucial actors in the plague ecosystem, fleas. These tiny parasites fed on the blood of their hosts and moved easily between animals. When plague infected rat populations, the fleas feeding on them became carriers of the bacteria. As rats died from infection, the fleas abandoned their dying hosts and searched for new ones. In crowded human environments, that new host was often a person. Even domestic animals could become part of this ecological chain. Cats, dogs, and livestock sometimes interacted with infected rodents or fleas, creating additional pathways for disease to move through human communities. What appears at first glance to be a human epidemic is therefore something much larger, a biological network connecting wildlife, parasites, domestic animals, and human societies. This is one of the most important lessons of plague history. Pandemics are not purely human events. They are ecological events, emerging from complex relationships between species sharing the same environment. Long before the first victim collapsed in the streets of a great city, the invisible drama of plague had already been unfolding among animals in distant landscapes. For centuries, Historians and scientists have asked a haunting question. Where did the plague begin? The pandemic that erupted in the 6th century did not appear out of nowhere. Like all infectious diseases, it had a deeper ecological origin, hidden somewhere within the vast landscapes that connected Africa, Asia, and the Mediterranean world. Yet identifying the exact birthplace of the Justinianic plague remains one of the great puzzles of historical epidemiology. Several regions have been proposed as possible origins. Some scholars point toward Central Asia, where vast steppe ecosystems supported enormous populations of wild rodents animals that are now known to host Yersinia pestis. These regions had long been connected to the wider world through trade routes that would later become known as the Silk Road. Others have suggested that the bacterium may have emerged from sub-Saharan Africa, where ancient ecological reservoirs of plague may have existed among wildlife. A third theory places the early spread of the disease in India, another region with dense trade networks linking it to the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea. Despite these competing theories, many historians and epidemiologists agree on one crucial point. By the early 6th century, the disease had almost certainly reached Egypt. Egypt was the agricultural heart of the Byzantine Empire and one of the most important logistical hubs of the ancient world. Each year, massive grain shipments traveled from the Nile Delta to feed the enormous population of Constantinople. These shipments created a constant flow of ships, merchants, animals, and cargo between Africa and the Mediterranean basin. The first historically recorded outbreak of the pandemic appeared in the Egyptian port city of Pelusium, located on the eastern edge of the Nile Delta. Contemporary historical accounts describe how the disease emerged there before, spreading rapidly along the coast in two directions, west toward Alexandria and east toward the cities of the Levant. From this strategic port, the infection began moving along the maritime arteries of the Byzantine world. Once the plague entered the trade networks of the Mediterranean, its spread became almost unstoppable. Merchant ships, grain fleets, and coastal transport vessels unknowingly carried infected rodents and fleas from harbor to harbor. Within a remarkably short period of time, the disease traveled across sea lanes and river systems that had once been symbols of prosperity and imperial unity. From the port city of Pelusium, the plague began its march across the empire. What had started as a local outbreak in a distant harbor would soon evolve into one of the most devastating pandemics of the ancient world, a catastrophe that would reach the great capital of Constantinople and reshape the history of an empire. In the 6th century, the survival of Constantinople depended on a vast and carefully organized supply system. The city's enormous population could not survive on local agriculture alone. Instead, its lifeline stretched hundreds of kilometers to the south, to the fertile floodplains of the Nile River. Each year, Egypt produced enormous quantities of grain that were shipped across the Mediterranean to feed the capital of the Byzantine Empire. This system was one of the greatest logistical operations of the ancient world. Massive grain ships sailed north from the ports of Egypt, especially from Alexandria and the cities of the Nile Delta. These vessels carried thousands of tons of wheat, packed into sacks and stored deep inside wooden hulls. When the ships reached Constantinople, the cargo was unloaded into vast imperial granaries that stored enough food to supply the city for months. But grain was not the only thing traveling in those ships. Hidden among the sacks of wheat and the dark corners of storage rooms were colonies of rats. The ships themselves provided perfect habitats for these animals, warm, enclosed spaces filled with food. Once rats boarded a vessel in Egypt, they could easily survive the entire journey across the Mediterranean. The grain ships feeding Constantinople also carried rats, and the rats carried fleas. These fleas were not simply harmless parasites. Some of them were infected with the bacterium Yersinia pestis. As long as the rats remained alive, the fleas continued feeding on their natural hosts. But when infected rat populations began to die during the voyage or shortly after arriving in port, the starving fleas searched for new sources of blood. In the crowded docks and markets of Constantinople, humans were suddenly surrounded by invisible carriers of disease. The result was a perfect biological accident created by human prosperity. Trade networks designed to transport food, wealth, and goods had unintentionally built the fastest possible highway for a deadly pathogen. Every ship that entered the harbor did not only carry the promise of sustenance, it also carried the possibility of catastrophe. What had once been the backbone of the empire's economic power was about to become the pathway of a pandemic. The ships that fed Constantinople would soon deliver something far more devastating than famine, a disease capable of overwhelming the greatest city of the Mediterranean world. In 542 CE, the plague reached Constantinople. What had begun as distant outbreaks in ports and coastal cities now arrived at the beating heart of the Byzantine Empire. Constantinople was not just another city. It was one of the largest urban centers on Earth, a dense and vibrant metropolis where hundreds of thousands of people lived, traded, prayed, and worked within massive defensive walls. But the very factors that made the city powerful, population, trade, and constant movement, also made it the perfect environment for an epidemic to explode. At first, the symptoms seemed mysterious. People developed sudden fevers, exhaustion, and painful swellings in the groin, neck, or armpits. Some victims experienced delirium or hallucinations. Others collapsed in the streets before they even understood they were sick. Within days, the number of cases multiplied at an alarming speed. Physicians were powerless. Traditional remedies failed. Panic began spreading faster than the disease itself. Soon the scale of the disaster became unimaginable. Contemporary historical accounts describe death on a massive scale. Some estimates suggest that around 5,000 people were dying every day, and at the height of the outbreak, the number may have reached 10,000 deaths daily. Streets that had once been crowded with merchants and travelers were now filled with funeral processions. The normal rhythm of city life began to collapse. The authorities struggled desperately to deal with the overwhelming number of bodies. At first, the dead were buried in cemeteries outside the city walls. But as the deaths continued, the burial grounds filled quickly. Workers were forced to dig enormous mass graves, stacking bodies in layers simply to make space for the next wave of victims. In some cases, abandoned towers and buildings were used as makeshift tombs. The smell of decay hung over the city. Entire neighborhoods fell eerily quiet. Shops closed. Markets emptied. Families locked themselves inside their homes, hoping to escape infection. Yet the disease moved silently through the city's dense population, carried by fleas that no one could see and bacteria that no one yet understood. The city that never slept fell silent. For the first time in centuries, Constantinople, the glittering capital of an empire that believed itself eternal, faced a crisis that armies and walls could not stop. An invisible enemy had entered its streets, and the consequences would echo far beyond the city itself. As the plague tightened its grip on Constantinople, no walls, no rank, and no privilege could guarantee safety. The disease did not distinguish between the poor and the powerful. Merchants died in their shops, laborers collapsed in the streets, priests fell within their churches. But one moment shocked the empire more than any other. The illness reached the imperial palace itself. Even Emperor Justinian I, the most powerful man in the Byzantine world, became infected. According to contemporary accounts, Justinian suddenly developed the same terrifying symptoms spreading across the city: fever, weakness, and the painful swellings that marked the plague. News of the emperor's illness spread rapidly through Constantinople, fueling fear and uncertainty. If the ruler chosen by God to lead the empire could fall victim to the disease, what hope remained for ordinary citizens? Inside the palace, anxiety grew. The emperor's survival was not merely a personal matter. It was a question of political stability. The Byzantine state was built around the authority of its ruler. If Justinian died, the empire could face a dangerous power struggle at the very moment when society was already collapsing under the weight of the epidemic. For days, the fate of the empire seemed uncertain. Yet in a rare turn of fortune, during a time of immense tragedy, Justinian survived the illness. While countless citizens perished, the emperor slowly recovered. His survival became a powerful symbol, interpreted by some as divine favor, by others simply as extraordinary luck. But even though Justinian lived, the plague left a deep scar on his reign. The empire he dreamed of restoring was now weakened by massive population loss, economic disruption, and social instability. The emperor had survived the disease, but the world he ruled would never fully return to what it had been before the plague. The Justinianic plague was not merely a statistic or a historical event. It was a deeply personal tragedy for every individual it touched. Across Constantinople and the surrounding regions, fear and uncertainty gripped entire communities. People lived under the constant threat that any cough, any fever, any unexplained swelling could be the herald of death. The symptoms of the disease were horrifying, both physically and psychologically. The most recognizable sign of infection was the bubo, a swollen, painful lymph node that appeared in the groin, armpit, or neck. These swellings were sometimes the size of an apple, dark and inflamed, and excruciatingly tender to the touch. Victims often developed high fevers, chills, and extreme weakness. Some experienced delirium and hallucinations, seeing visions that blurred the line between reality and fevered nightmare. In the worst cases, death came suddenly, leaving families stunned and communities paralyzed with grief. Some victims died within a single day. Entire households could be decimated overnight. Children lost parents, parents lost children, and the streets of the city became filled with grief-stricken survivors struggling to bury the dead. Hospitals, where they existed, were quickly overwhelmed. The care of the sick became almost impossible. Physicians themselves were at constant risk, and many succumbed to the same disease they sought to treat. The psychological impact was just as severe as the physical toll. Fear, suspicion, and despair spread faster than the bacterium itself. Communities became fragmented, social rituals were abandoned, and people often isolated themselves in desperate attempts to survive. Neighbors no longer trusted neighbors. Families could not grieve together. In the midst of a bustling empire, the plague turned daily life into a scene of terror and chaos. In short, the Justinianic plague did not merely take lives, it shattered the human experience, leaving scars that extended far beyond the physical realm. It was a catastrophe felt deeply by every soul who encountered it, a reminder that disease in its most virulent form can strike without warning, indiscriminately, and with unimaginable cruelty. While the human toll of the Justinianic plague was staggering, the catastrophe extended far beyond people. Animals, both domestic and wild, suffered immensely. Historical accounts describe dogs, cats, and livestock falling ill alongside their human companions. Horses that once carried merchants and soldiers through the streets of Constantinople and across the countryside weakened and died. Even household pets, beloved members of families, succumbed to the same invisible enemy. The plague did not discriminate between species. Fleas carrying Yersinia pestis jumped from rats to other mammals, creating multiple channels of infection. Cattle and sheep that grazed near infected rodents sometimes became sick, disrupting agriculture and food supplies. Dogs and cats, often used for protection and hunting, died in large numbers, leaving households vulnerable and amplifying human suffering. This widespread mortality revealed a painful truth. Pandemics are ecological disasters, not merely human events. Entire communities of animals collapsed, changing the balance of local ecosystems. The death of rodents, predators, and livestock had cascading effects, influencing disease transmission, food availability, and the daily lives of surviving humans. In many ways, the suffering of animals amplified the human tragedy. As people witnessed their companions fall, the emotional impact of the plague deepened. Hunger increased when livestock died, pets disappeared, and the familiar rhythm of everyday life was broken. The Justinianic plague, therefore, must be understood not only as a human disaster, but as a shared catastrophe across species, a reminder that humans are never separate from the larger web of life. The Justinianic plague did not vanish after the initial horrors of 541 CE. In fact, the first outbreak was only the beginning. What began as a sudden, catastrophic epidemic in Constantinople and the Mediterranean soon evolved into a long-term pandemic, recurring in waves over the next 2 centuries. Cities that had once teetered on the brink of collapse found themselves facing new waves of death, sometimes decades apart, each time weakening the social, economic, and political fabric of the Byzantine Empire. Historical records describe multiple resurgences throughout the 6th and 7th centuries. Port cities, trade hubs, and even rural villages were periodically struck. Scholars estimate that the plague returned roughly every 12 to 15 years, though some waves were more severe than others. Each new outbreak compounded previous losses, slowly reshaping populations, labor systems, and urban life. Merchants, soldiers, and peasants alike were caught in this relentless cycle, as survival became a constant struggle against both disease and uncertainty. The long duration of the pandemic had profound consequences. Economic output declined as farms, workshops, and cities suffered labor shortages. Military campaigns faltered as troops succumbed to illness. Political instability increased as rulers grappled with dwindling populations and widespread fear. In many ways, the empire's trajectory was permanently altered. Recovery after each outbreak became slower, and the ideal of restoring the Roman world under Justinian was increasingly difficult to achieve. Perhaps most importantly, the plague reshaped the human understanding of disease. Societies learned, often painfully, that pandemics are not fleeting disasters, but enduring ecological and social events. The Justinianic plague became a historical lesson in resilience, adaptation, and the fragility of human civilization in the face of microbial forces that can span generations. The first outbreak was only the beginning, and its shadow lingered across the Mediterranean world for nearly 2 centuries. The Justinianic plague did not only take lives, it upended the very foundations of society. As waves of disease swept across the Byzantine Empire, the economy faltered. Fields went untended as farmers fell ill or died, and grain production plunged. Trade slowed dramatically as merchants faced empty streets, fear, and the ever-present threat of infection. The once bustling marketplaces of Constantinople and other cities became eerily quiet, their vibrancy replaced by a chilling stillness. Military strength, the backbone of imperial power, was also severely compromised. Armies that Justinian had sent to reclaim lost territories found their ranks thinned by death. Recruitment became nearly impossible, and existing troops were weakened by loss and exhaustion. Without a healthy and plentiful force, campaigns stalled, borders became vulnerable, and the empire's political influence diminished. Urban life itself transformed under the weight of the pandemic. Entire neighborhoods were abandoned as residents fled or succumbed to the plague. Public buildings, temples, and forums were deserted, and the cityscape of Constantinople, once alive with energy, color, and commerce, became a haunting vision of decay. In some regions, towns and villages were permanently depopulated, leaving fields fallow and structures in ruins. The social fabric, painstakingly woven over centuries, unraveled quickly. Families were torn apart, communities dispersed, and trust between neighbors eroded. What had seemed like a stable, eternal society now faced the fragility of life exposed by an invisible enemy. The Justinianic plague demonstrated that disease is not merely a medical event. It is a catalyst for societal collapse, reshaping every aspect of human existence, from economics to governance to daily life. In the end, the empire survived, but the world Justinian had envisioned a prosperous, powerful Roman restoration would never fully return. The plague had reshaped society, leaving a legacy of loss, disruption, and a stark reminder of human vulnerability. The true scale of the Justinianic plague is almost incomprehensible. Historical sources are fragmented, estimates vary widely, and yet all accounts agree on one terrifying fact: millions of lives were lost. Scholars today suggest that somewhere between 25 and 100 million people may have perished over the course of the pandemic. In some regions, entire communities vanished, leaving behind empty villages, abandoned farms, and silent streets that had once been bustling with life. Some historians go even further, arguing that the plague killed nearly half the population of Europe. Cities like Constantinople, Antioch, Alexandria, and Carthage suffered catastrophic losses, and the ripple effects spread across trade networks, rural settlements, and distant provinces. The magnitude of mortality was unlike anything the Mediterranean world had seen before, challenging the social, political, and economic structures that had seemed permanent and unshakable. The psychological toll was equally profound. Families mourned countless lost loved ones, and survivors were left to navigate a world dramatically altered by absence and grief. Labor shortages, disrupted food production, and shattered communities compounded the human suffering, creating a cascade of challenges that lasted for decades. Every corner of the empire, from the grandest palace to the humblest farmstead, felt the weight of death. In some, the Justinianic plague was not merely a medical crisis, it was a demographic cataclysm, a force that reshaped populations, economies, and societies. Its legacy was measured not only in lost lives, but also in the enduring transformation of the world itself. The Justinianic plague left an indelible mark not only on human populations, but also on the trajectory of empires. The Byzantine Empire, once the unchallenged power of the Mediterranean, was profoundly weakened. The massive loss of life disrupted tax collection, decimated armies, and undermined the stability of the imperial administration. Territories that had been easily defended now became vulnerable as both military and civilian populations dwindled. Military campaigns, essential to Justinian's vision of restoring the Roman Empire, suffered devastating setbacks. Soldiers died faster than they could be replaced, and cities and provinces fell to invading forces or rebellious factions. Strategic initiatives were abandoned, borders became porous, and the empire's ability to project power diminished. The plague had transformed what had seemed invincible into fragile and overstretched. The ripple effects extended beyond Byzantium. As one empire weakened, new powers began to rise, shifting the balance of the Mediterranean world. Neighboring states seized the opportunity to expand territories, consolidate power, and influence trade routes. The Justinianic plague, therefore, did more than reduce populations. It reshaped geopolitical landscapes, creating openings for change, conflict, and transformation that would reverberate for centuries. For centuries, the Justinianic plague was known only through written accounts, chronicles, and the oral stories passed down across generations. Skeptics questioned the scale, the origin, and even the very existence of such a catastrophic epidemic. It wasn't until modern science began to probe the past that the full truth emerged. In 2013, a team of scientists made a groundbreaking discovery. Using advanced techniques in ancient DNA analysis, they confirmed the presence of Yersinia pestis in the remains of plague victims from the 6th century. This microscopic evidence validated centuries of historical observation, proving that the bacterium identified centuries later as the cause of the Black Death had already wrought devastation nearly 1,000 years earlier. The study of ancient DNA not only confirmed the pathogen, but also illuminated its pathways, evolution, and the ecological contexts in which it thrived. Researchers could trace the strain back to its origins and better understand how trade routes, human migration, and interactions with animals facilitated its spread. In essence, science bridged the gap between legend and reality, providing tangible proof of the invisible killer that had once shaped the fate of empires. Modern investigation has transformed the Justinianic plague from a shadowy historical tale into a documented event with biological certainty. What was once the stuff of chronicles and conjecture is now a case study in the enduring power of microbes, the vulnerability of civilizations, and the remarkable insights that emerge when history and science intersect. The Justinianic plague, though distant in time, offers profound lessons for the modern world. Pandemics are not accidents. They are the inevitable result of complex interactions between humans, animals, and microbes. Trade networks, urban density, and ecological disruption all create opportunities for pathogens to emerge and spread. Just as grain ships carried rats and fleas across the Mediterranean, today's globalized economy can move microbes across continents in a matter of hours. Understanding the ecological roots of pandemics is crucial. Human activity, deforestation, animal domestication, wildlife trade, and urban expansion brings people into closer contact with disease reservoirs. Cities, while centers of innovation and culture, can also become amplifiers of infection. The Justinianic plague reminds us that social, economic, and environmental factors are deeply intertwined with the dynamics of disease. Modern science, surveillance, and public health interventions offer tools that ancient societies could not imagine. Yet the fundamental principles remain the same. Pathogens exploit connectivity, vulnerability, and ecological imbalance. By studying the past, we gain insight into how to anticipate, prepare for, and mitigate future pandemics. History teaches that ignoring the lessons of previous outbreaks is not only reckless, it is dangerous. Ultimately, the story of the Justinianic plague underscores the shared responsibility of humans within the larger ecosystem. Microbes do not act in isolation, and neither do we. Our choices, interactions with animals, and management of cities shape the course of disease. Recognizing this interconnectedness is the key to resilience in a world where pandemics are not mere possibilities. They are recurring challenges that demand vigilance, foresight, and cooperation. Empires rise and fall, but microbes remain. The story of the Justinianic plague is a stark reminder that tiny organisms can reshape human history. For centuries, these invisible killers determined the fate of cities, empires, and entire civilizations. Yet in the modern world, our understanding of microbes has transformed fear into knowledge, and knowledge into powerful tools for prevention and cure. Today, Yersinia pestis, the bacterium behind the plague, still exists in nature, primarily among wild rodents in parts of Africa, Asia, and the Americas. However, modern medicine has dramatically reduced its threat. Antibiotics, discovered in the 20th century, can now treat plague effectively when administered promptly. Public health surveillance, rapid diagnostics, and quarantine measures ensure that outbreaks are detected early and contained before they escalate into pandemics. Moreover, advances in microbiology, epidemiology, and global health policy have provided insights into how diseases emerge and spread. Vaccines, while not widely used for plague today, are under continuous research. Preventive measures, like controlling rodent populations, monitoring flea activity, and educating communities, complement medical treatment. In essence, the world now fights with knowledge and preparation rather than helplessness and fear. The Justinianic plague reminds us that while microbes endure across centuries, humanity has the capacity to adapt, respond, and mitigate their impact. The echoes of the past guide modern medicine, teaching that vigilance, scientific inquiry, and coordinated action can turn what once was a historical catastrophe into a manageable risk in our interconnected world. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history and science. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to stay updated on our latest explorations. Hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next story, where we continue to uncover the fascinating ways humans, animals, and microbes have shaped our world. Take care of yourself, stay curious, and may you enjoy a healthy and vibrant life.